Yeah. The only other question I have written down is about 5G, 4G, 5G. Oh, that came up earlier this week. And oh gosh, you started explaining it to me. You explained that it's generation, that's what the G stands for.
Hmm.
It's not that like 2G is two times better and 3G is three times better than 1G. It's just the generation of
Yeah,
software stuff. The
it it's a combination because
right?
because recently the president tweeted out 5G, 6G. That's how the conversation came
That-
to be, and so
He's demanding 6G, which you said doesn't exist.
yeah, as most people know, 6E doesn't exist except maybe in theoretical place somewhere. Um,
Just
but
not yet.
yeah, right now the 5G rollout has not happened yet. There's been one 5G phone that has been sued because it wasn't truly 5G. Now, the difference between first generation, second generation, really, we didn't come to calling it anything until the third generation 3G. That's when it started becoming available where you could use your phone and access the internet pretty easily. They still had what was like a mobile version of the internet, which was different than how it is now. So back when flip phones and things were first getting on the internet, they had the crappiest sites you've ever had because all sites had to have a mobile version of
Right.
their site, which was literally just like text.
And they still do have to have a separate app,
Not
right?
necessarily, no.
Oh, because there
It's
is like an auto format, but
now,
that's when
yeah,
it's
now
not
they're
so
learning
great.
to
Most of
scale.
them do
It,
have some kind of different.
so a lot of time now sites have learned you can code it to scale depending on the screen size, and it will adjust things properly to the size of the screen. And it's become so commonplace now that like you could go online and get a free Google site and have that free Google site for whatever you're doing, blog posts, videos, or whatever, will be as fluid as like a professional site when it comes to scaling up and down with the rest of the um, with the devices that it's being used. But so back to the history. So first generation, it was like text boxes, right? Not even first generation, but before 3G, really, it was just text boxes. So like if I had a Boost mobile phone, that was my first flip phone, and when you got onto the internet with it, um, it was literally just look. It was almost like you're going through files, like in your file system on
And that
Explorer.
that was when you had to pay for every bit of internet you used through your phone for any phone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never got on the internet back then. I think my first phone I can remember, and it was significant. It was a Motorola Razr flip, the
Yeah,
silver.
they also had that same
I
internet though,
love that.
where it was all just basically text. It felt like going through a file system on your computer, right?
Yeah, I
Like
could
going through.
see. Yeah.
And then you had after that, well, like once 3G came around, it was the first. It was prominent because it was the first one to kind of be able to load at a fast speed. Um, so it made it so that like you didn't have to spend your time separate from like being away from your phone or spend your time like if you before you had to dedicate time to the internet on your phone, right? Like you basically if you're going to do it because everything took so long to load and it was just almost going through files. If you wanted to get somewhere, it took a long time to get there. Then when 3G came out, it was well, at the time snappy, right? And also you could get actual internet out of it, right? So there was oftentimes a mobile version of the site that was a dumbed down version that didn't have all the extras, but it got you on the site at least, and in a snappy amount of time. then when 4G came out, it was almost like running the internet as you would on your own Wi-Fi. It was some people it was almost just as fast. Like unless you had like really good internet, most average people have about 5 megs per second upload download, which 4G can actually equate to in some circumstances. Right. So like and you could actually use it. And then along with that came like the scaling of sites, so they didn't necessarily need to have a mobile version. But there still are sites that do have a mobile version that they just keep it separate. But a lot of sites also just scale, right? And oh, what was your question?
It's kind of a different.
Oh, all right. Let me finish the history then. So so there's no there between the first generation, second generation, third, fourth, and fifth generation. It's not like the fourth generation is twice as good as like a third generation or anything. There is usually it's a hardware software combination between the towers that the companies are using, the hardware, the firmware that it's all using, and then also the hardware and the phone and the firmware that supports it, and then the software that goes along with all of that. So every usually once they get to a certain kind of quality ahead, they defined another generation as they've been able to make a big enough improvement to consider it worth going into commercial grade for, right? Because there's probably 100 or 1,000 increments between the fourth and fifth generation, but now that they've gotten to a certain point, they've decided this can be used out in commercial because it's considerably better, and it will take like a long time before we even get to sixth generation, right?
Yeah.
So like instead of making a huge leap, they decided like, all right, this is a so they have like probably a standard baseline of how much better it is, and now they have to get the equipment, they have to make it so that now they usually once they have that standard and they've tested it and made it, then they have to figure out how to make it cheaper and how to make it smaller and how to make it so that it can be commercialized. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is how to get it rolling out to the rest of the United States so that they can use it. And often what happens when it comes to infrastructure is we do end up behind in infrastructure. As being part of the United States, and any first world country tends to fall behind in infrastructure because you run into the problem where you have something that works and you have something better, and since that thing that is better costs a lot of money to put in and you have something that works, most people or most companies will just wait until the last possible moment to get that upgrade.
So you don't mean that we've fallen behind other countries?
So well,
per se.
in a sense, like third world countries that are becoming industrialized and they are getting this technology, they will get the new technology, right? So when they put in their infrastructure, let's say a country right now is getting cell signal for the first time. They're putting in 5G towers because it's not that much more expensive.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
And so they would end up with 5G before we would.
Okay.
As have an adoption for it. Right now, it's the big thing is internet cable lines, right? We have the potential for gigabyte internet where you get a gigabyte up and down speed, but nowhere in the US outside of a few pocket areas will you be able to get that at a commercial grade. While there's other countries that have that as a standard for like that if you were just a regular person, you could get that for your internet for your house. While here, if you want a gigabyte internet, you have to have a business in order that could pay for.
So why is it?
So
how do you get that? The gigabyte? What
you would need?
Is it satellites or?
No, it's cabling.
Okay.
That you would need, and like I think it's fiber wire cabling or whatever. Google is the one that was trying to push it out for the longest
Mm.
time, and they have it in a few different cities. But the problem is you have to re-cabled everything after you've already cabled everything. So
It's
like it's
it's
trillions and
there, it
trillions of
works.
dollars
Yeah.
to add new cabling or replace your old cabling. And replacing it would be even more expensive because you have to take out the cabling and put it in. It'd probably be cheaper just to dig another hole right next to it and then line the cabling. And but it's still trillions and trillions of dollars to remap the entire area that's already been cabled. But new places, once they start getting cabling, because they'll probably get the newest cabling because they like it's out there and it exists and it's not that much more expensive. It's just expensive to do everything at once. It's such a big task. Only to maybe one day in the future have even better cabling to outdo that. So that's how we end up falling a little bit behind.
Okay.